All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, today we are talking about the subject around the gap between rehab and hiking performance, which is a really important subject for any hiker who is dealing with some type of long-term pain. And this is a subject which, if you can wrap your heads around it and so understand and apply the ideas in this video, it can give you a massive advantage in your pain reduction journey and ultimately helping you get out on your adventures feeling as comfortable as possible. So to start with, when it comes down to it, pain and injury, very common in the world of hiking. A lot of people from the outside in looking at hiking, they may be like, oh, hiking's pretty easy. Why would there be pain? But we know as hikers, it's a really common thing. Things like knee pain, foot pain, ankle pain and sprains, back pain, shin splints, hip pain, all of these things are really common for hikers. Whether it's a short-term thing, they go out and hike, they get all of a sudden this random pain that creeps up, or a bit more of a chronic long-term thing. Super common. And today we're basically going to be explaining one of the major reasons, not the only reason, but one of the major reasons why pain is so common in the world of hiking and why what we call the traditional rehab model and the approach that a lot of people may take can often fall a bit short for this community. So to start with, let's talk about this traditional rehab model, for lack of better words. And essentially this is a really common sort of model or common sort of cycle that pretty much everyone has gone through at one stage or another. So basically the traditional approach to pain is you get pain or an injury. Maybe you have a flare-up of discomfort, or maybe you sprain your ankle, you have something bad go on, you get pain and injury. You're like, you know what, I'm in pain, I'm going to go see a professional. So maybe you see a physiotherapist or a physical therapist. Some people will see like a podiatrist or a chiro or an osteopath or whatever it may be. You go see a professional who specializes in pain. Now, the professional, what they'll do is they'll poke around. They'll typically diagnose the issue if they can. They'll usually sort of say, hey, have some rest from whatever caused you the pain, and just make sure you're not aggravating that pain while it's recovering. And they'll probably give you some exercises to do, maybe some stretches, maybe some strengthening, something like that. Now, typically what happens is you rest, you avoid that thing was aggravating the pain, and you do the exercises. Or some people do the exercises, some people don't. And over time, things begin to feel better. And then essentially you see the professional again after a certain number of weeks or a certain number of months or whatever it may be. And they're like, you know what, actually, you're in a good position right now. You know what, you can actually go out and just do normal exercise. You can go on, just do things as normal, go out with your life or whatever it may be. This is typically the traditional approach to kind of what we call rehab or pain recovery that a lot of people will go through. Now, this process, it is pretty effective. It's not perfect, but it's pretty effective for people who are just living everyday life. People who just want to go about their days feeling comfortable, just go to work, just deal with their family, just sort of like be social and feel pretty comfortable. However, for hikers, this particular process, it can often fall a little bit short. Now, the issue with this kind of traditional model that we're looking at is ultimately there is a big difference between being ready for everyday life and actually being ready for hiking. And as hikers, we know this. However, a lot of professionals who are dealing with rehab or dealing with pain prevention, sometimes they, whether it's overlook this or just don't put a huge amount of attention to this or don't prioritize this or whatever it may be, for one reason, this just doesn't get respected during this process and it gets a lot of people into trouble. So basically, realistically, when it comes down to hiking, even on the most simple hikes, the most gentle hikes out there we're doing, we're typically exposed to things like multiple hours of movement. Most hikes are going to go for 60 minutes plus. Some days will be full days, then there's overnighters, there's multi-days, there's all of this. We're going to be exposed to long periods of movement. Obviously, uneven terrain. Hiking isn't just a nice manicured path. We've got rough terrain. We've got rock scrambling. We've got been on traverses, been in weird positions. Pack carrying. Whether you're carrying a day pack or a full pack or anything in between, for every single extra kilo you carry on your back, it puts a lot of extra pressure through the body. And then obviously we've got ascents and descents, like going up steep hills puts particular demands on the body. Going down steep steps or steep descents is often a trigger for pain. And what will typically happen is, we know hiking will have all of these things, no matter what type of gentle hikes we're doing. And what will typically happen if someone goes through this traditional rehab model, once we're cleared for exercise and said, hey, go out and do what you want to do, most hikers are like this stage where like, you know what, I'm actually going to go out and start hiking again, or I'm going to start pushing the hikes again, or whatever it may be, because that's what they want to do. Now, for a lot of hikers in this situation, and this is a story I've heard hundreds of times over the years of doing this, is a hiker will go through that traditional rehab model, they'll get back into hiking, they'll maybe go through 1 or 2 hikes okay, and then they're like, you know what, actually that felt okay, I'm going to step things up a little bit more. I'm going to do a more challenging hike, or I'm going to do an overnighter, or I'm going to do one with a bit more elevation, or whatever it may be, and they choose a more challenging hike, and then the pain comes back. And they're like, oh my gosh, I went through all of this and my knee pain's back, or I went through all of this and my foot pain's back, or whatever it may be. And it can be absolutely soul crushing in this situation. And they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's back. It's sucking things out and the fun out of these adventures. And yeah, it's really, really tough. And I've spoken to so many hikers over the years who've been in this situation. And ultimately, this will either lead to one of two situations for a lot of people. Number one, it can turn into this recurring cycle where people are just constantly going through this rehab cycle. They'll go through rehab, they'll have that break, the pain will get better, then they'll go out and hike, pain will come back, so they'll go back to rehab and they'll go back to their physio. They say, you know what, something's wrong. Physio will give them more exercises, advise more rest, and then it just ends up being this cycle. Or they'll end up just turning over all these different health professionals. They'll go to one physio, then another, then another, then another, and continually they're just going through this cycle, but nothing really ever seems to change majorly. Or eventually people get to this stage where they're like, you know what, I've done this so many times and nothing seems to change, so maybe I'm just always going to be in pain when I hike. And they end up just dealing with it, just pushing through. There's a typical thing of like people in the hiking community call it dealing with vitamin I, just having mouthfuls of ibuprofen just to get through their hikes. And they just accept it, and it just ends up being, the long-term thing. Again, I've seen both of these situations so many times. Now, to put this into like context and give you a bit of a visual, this photo kind of gives a really, really good idea in regards to just why these traditional things often do fall short. In the sense that this particular photo, when I got this taken, this was on an incredibly, incredibly gentle hike. And in all honesty, I was just going on somewhere nice, somewhere easy, just get a few photos taken. But even on this hike, which was super gentle, I was still exposed to this, which was basically walking along the path. There was this step down, which was about roughly the height of my knee, and I'm relatively tall, I'm about 6 foot, so roughly the height of my knee, where I had to step down without a huge amount of support. And as you can see, my knees were put in a pretty intense position. This is on the most gentle hike out there. Now, this is just on a really, really gentle one, but then we got to think, okay, in other hikes, we may be doing this repeated times, dozens of times, even hundreds of times. We may be going super steep up. We may be on like really rough stuff or whatever it may be. And as you can kind of see, this is a challenge. As hikers, we know this. And realistically, when we look at this traditional rehab model, where typically hikers who may have knee pain may just be given some clams, some bodyweight squats, some bridges, some wall sits, these things that are just super, 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 super common and really good just to get you ready for everyday life. But realistically, when we look at these typical rehab exercises, we've got to ask ourselves the question, is that type of thing realistically going to get the body ready for this type of stress? Doing these big steps, carrying a pack on our back or whatever it may be? In all honesty, probably not. And this is the issue that hikers face. So essentially, when it comes to this topic and this whole idea between the gap between rehab and performance and having to train and prepare ourselves for these specific demands, for the everyday hiker who doesn't have a history of pain and injury, in all honesty, this isn't a big deal because we probably do steps like that all the time and not even give it second thought. But if you do have a history of a bit of a history for pain, this is something you want to have a bit more consideration. This is something you want to take a little bit more seriously because it is really, really, really important. And essentially what we want to be doing is doing what we can to prepare our body for these types of things so ultimately can better handle on the trail. And essentially we're filling this gap between what's rehab's gotten us ready for and what we actually need to get ready for on the trail. And that's that gap I'm talking about, filling this gap. Now, this ultimately can be a little bit of an art and a science in the sense that on the science side of things, obviously we need to know what you actually need to be doing to best help your particular issue. So whether it's foot pain, knee pain, back pain, whatever it may be, what are the things you need to be doing to prepare your body for that, prepare your body to deal with those things on the trail? That's the science part of it, and obviously there's a lot that goes into it. Now, the art side of things is a little bit less sort of set in stone in the sense that everyone does have their own individual needs. Everyone's got their own preferences, situations, time availabilities, histories, accessibility, all of that. And there is no one size fits all approach when it comes down to this thing. So as much as with a lot of this information, I can sort of say, science-wise, we want to be working on X, Y, and Z and making sure this all applies. You're covering all your bases, but then we need the art of applying it to your particular situation, which can make this a little bit tricky. But to give you a few general ideas on this and how we can fill the gap, Really, really simply, on the first and foremost, strengthening. When it comes down to any type of pain or injury prevention, strength training can be super, super, super beneficial. And essentially building up the strength and the supporting muscles can just ultimately help them better handle the stresses that come with hiking, and ultimately getting ready for all those weird and wonderful positions that we get put in on the trail, like that example of me stepping down. That's what we want to be doing with our strengthening. Now, many hikers who've gone through the traditional rehab stuff, they've done some exercises, a few clams, squats, glute bridges, maybe some lunges and this and that. But strengthening can go a long, long, long way beyond this. And essentially with any type of strengthening, we want to be thinking, okay, number one, are we working the body as a whole? Are we being comprehensive and making sure all the muscles are getting targeted in one way or another? And also number two, are we slowly but surely making things harder and harder and harder, progressing things, which often does get missed in a traditional rehab thing as well. So strengthening is a really, really big topic, but basically we can go a lot further with this and get a lot more benefit out of this than just the typical approach with just a few exercises and just do them a bunch. Now, essentially, when we're looking at strengthening, we want to be looking at general strength. So just basically generally building up the strength in the legs, doing things like squats and loading that up and getting a bit heavier and heavier and heavier over time and building up general strength in the legs. But we also want to look at sort of what we call specific strength and looking at strength training, which can sort of expose the body to some of those specific demands we have on the trail. So a classic example of this is an assisted pistol box squat. And essentially, this is a really specific move where we can basically slowly lower down to a low bench or a chair. And we're really, really looking at controlling that descent and slowly lowering. And then we sit down, stand up with two legs. Now, this particular exercise is really good at developing, the quadriceps to handle this slow lower, helping us build stability in the knees. And this is really relevant to that, again, that stepping down example I had before. And when we're looking at our strength training, there's lots of different ways we can sort of dive into this more specific stuff, which goes a long way. Now, next area you can kind of look at filling the gap is what we call hiking specific conditioning, which is essentially just a fancy way of saying cardiovascular exercise, which is relevant to the demands of hiking. Very, very simple. Now, essentially, this comes into two important factors. Number one is fatigue and exhaustion are risk factors when it comes to pain and injury on the trail. So essentially, if we're getting overly fatigued, this puts us at a higher risk of both pain just coming up and also having a bit of an accident, a misstep, a fall or something like that, which can lead to slightly higher risk of injury. So essentially doing conditioning or cardio and just generally improving our fitness so we get less fatigued on the trail, this can help reduce it. Now, on top of that, this is also a really, really good place where we can expose the body to some of these specific stresses which you may face while hiking. So again, we're filling the gap between rehab and filling the gap between what we need while hiking, and this can work really, really well. So a simple example of this is loaded pack walking. As we sort of said, hiking, loaded pack is a challenge, and we do want to expose the body and prepare the body for this. So a really simple way of going about this is doing some loaded pack walking around the local neighborhood, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes at a time with a pack on your back, just walking around the neighborhood week by week, adding a little extra load, a little extra weight. That is a really, really good way of filling this gap, exposing the body to these stresses. So when you actually go out on the trail with a pack, that's much more manageable. Or it may be, ascents and descents. They can be pretty big risk factors for pain. So it may be a case of, we're preparing our body for those. Hills or stair intervals at home where you're going up and down a hill or a set of stairs a bunch of times and slowly exposing the body to this type of thing. And again, filling this gap. Or in some situations, some people might be like, when I go out hiking, my friends or the group I like to go out with, they actually walk pretty quickly. And I'm not really used to that. And that can be a little bit tricky for me. So again, the gap we may want to fill in this situation is exposing the body to slightly quicker walking. There's some quicker walking sessions. So the body can get used to those stresses, get used to those things, and be a little bit more comfortable on the trail. So again, we're just sort of thinking, what's the difference between just where we are day-to-day life and what do we need for the actual trail? How can we fill this gap? And this hiking specific conditioning can work really well here. And then the final thing is just sort of making sure, we have gradual hiking exposure in the sense that if you are looking at coming out of rehab and looking at getting back into your hiking, having a return to hiking plan can be really, really powerful. And essentially what all that involves is just mapping out the next weeks and months of your hiking to ensure that you have a slow and steady build up. So instead of going from 0 to 100, or instead of just sort of jumping, do a couple of easy hikes, then all of a sudden you do a super difficult one, get yourself into pain, just making sure we have a slow and steady build up of your hiking and slowly getting a little bit harder, So this may be just making sure you have a slow build up in distance, making sure you have a slow build up in pack weight, or whatever it may be. And if you have a particular end goal you need to get ready for, whether you've got a particular trip that you need to get ready for and there's particular metrics you need to be, or you just want to get back into your normal hiking, which involves a certain amount of challenge, you want to slowly build yourself up to that. This will ensure that, number one, you're not jumping into things too early and just risk flaring things up again. So you're not going from 0 to 100 or whatever it may be. But also in the training sense is if we can gradually expose the body to these specific demands of hiking, again, filling that gap between where you were before and where you want to be for your actual hiking, this will give the body a chance to adapt and get stronger and fitter in these situations. So really, really, really important. So coming down, just summarizing this very, very briefly, the traditional rehab model, it's great for everyday life, but it can sometimes fall short for many hikers. Some professionals, admittedly, are great here, and they will go the extra mile to kind of help you fill that gap and build things and give you extra information. But in all honesty, it's really, really, really hard to find them. And a lot of professionals, that's not really their role, and they're not really there to really do that for people. Now, if you are one of these people who are stuck in a recurring cycle of rehab, or you've ultimately just accepted your lot after all of this and you're like, you know what, I'm just always going to be pain while I'm hiking, just know there can be a better way. Filling the gap with your training between that rehab and your demands of hiking can be absolutely life-changing for so many hikers out there. And I really strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to put a bit of thought and attention here. And if you can do this, you can be intentional here, you can be smart here and fill this gap as best as you can. It can be absolutely game-changing for your hiking. Now, hopefully this does give you a little bit of insight into the whole concept of rehab for hiking and kind of getting yourself to where you need to be. However, I fully understand, obviously I've only just briefly touched on some of these things. I fully understand if you understand this kind of concept, but the actual act of putting this together and stringing this all together and making sure you are doing everything you can be a little bit tough. So if you do need a little bit of help putting this all together, I would love to chat with you, and this is exactly what I do. Essentially, through Summit Strength, which is my online personal training service for hikers, we offer personalized training programs and personalized online training programs for hikers to get them fit, strong, and resilient for their adventures. Now, typically our packages, what they include is, number one, we will create a customized and personalized workout program to get you ready for anything the trail may throw at you. So covering off strength training, covering off that hiking specific conditioning, covering off your hiking programming, also doing some recovery mobility work, all fit around your life, your preferences, and your specific needs. Now, on top of that, we also do put a big emphasis into educating you on all the peripheral factors which can make or break an adventure. So things like nutrition, recovery, self-care, other pain prevention strategies, mental strength, and a bunch of other things. And on top of that, we will give you the coaching, support, and accountability to keep you on track, because pain prevention journeys, they're never smooth. There's always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There's things that come up. We'll make sure you have someone in your corner to help you through the down periods, to answer any questions you have, and basically keep you accountable so you can get the best benefits out of this type of thing. Now, if you did want to learn a little bit more about this, what you can do is go to summitstrength.com.au/online. Now, on that page, we do have a big video which kind of talks through our program in a bit of detail, explains how we go about things. And ultimately, if you did want to learn a little bit more and see if and how this may be right for you, on that page, you can book a call with our team. We can have a good chat, learn about you, your situation, your needs. And if it sounds like something we're confident we can help you with, we can kind of talk you through one of our packages, which may potentially fit into your situation. So if you did want to learn a little bit more, go to summitstrength.com.au/online. But with that being said, I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. Hopefully this fills in a few gaps in regards to, knowledge in this situation. And I really do hope this helps quite a few hikers out there who may be stuck in this recurring cycle. So hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you very, very soon.